Let's discuss the situation between some of the researchers on the University of Minnesota and the Linux kernel community. Still, it's an ongoing discussion, it's an ongoing debate on the internet today and yesterday. So I'm going to try to kind of summarize the issue that is going on and kind of bring both parties, because the internet is divided on this one, and kind of me too as well. So I'm gonna trying to kind of summarize this issue. Also, the University of Minnesota actually replied, and we're gonna read that statement in a minute. How about we jump into it? Guys, welcome to the Backend Engineering Show. This is your host, Hussein Nasser, where we discuss software news, we discuss backend news, we discuss anything related to software. This is the software podcast. So, 2 months ago, the University of Minnesota, with few students, research students, have come up with a paper. And I'll try to avoid showing any names or anything like that, because the author of the researchers and whoever made these comments essentially got a lot of backlash, and I don't want to add to that, to be honest. Let's try to keep things as civil as possible, and it's just like look at things from a positive perspective as much as possible. So the paper is titled "On the Feasibility of Stealthy Introducing Vulnerabilities in the Open Source Software via Hypocrite Commits." So the goal of this paper was to shed a light on a very common theme of a problem that happens with the open source software. So a lot of open source software gets malicious comment inserted into it. We just covered PHP and how 2 commits went in as typos that did completely really bad things. Essentially installed the rootkit into the PHP source code. So this paper essentially shed light into this, and it uses Linux kernel as an example. So that was 2 months ago. This paper has been written, and let me read this blurb, and then we're gonna discuss more. Again, I'm not gonna show the paper or the names or anything like that. So you can just, with 2 clicks, you can find all this details if you want to. So, quote, "In this paper, we instead investigate the insecurities of the open source software from a critical perspective, the feasibility of a malicious committer stealthily introducing vulnerabilities such as use after free in the open source community through the hypocrite commits, essentially seemingly beneficial minor commits that actually introduce other critical issues. Such introduced vulnerabilities can be critical as they can exist in the open source software for a long period and be exploited by the malicious committer to impact a massive number of devices and users." And so what happened here, after 2 months, another PhD researcher from the University of Minnesota picked up this research, looks like, and tried to kind of implement this somehow. They submitted many commits that are malicious. Some of them are good, with good intention, to the Linux kernel, to the actual Linux kernel repo, okay, to kind of test this hypothesis. That's what from what I'm reading from the mailing list, you can see all of this track, like submitting of this stuff, right? Obviously, the student have all good intention in heart. They wanted to see, they didn't really want to break Linux, but because they essentially submitted faulty bugs, not necessarily vulnerable, but faulty bug that, get this, actually got merged into the Linux repo, from what I'm reading. Again, correct me guys if I'm wrong, but they got merged. Some of them got merged. They just show that the review process of how things can get, but essentially these eventually got detected by the maintainers of the Linux kernels, and boy, they were mad when they found out that actually this was quote unquote a test. So obviously whoever submitted these commits didn't have bad faith. Okay, I'm gonna break kernel, but the way it was done, I think, with all that's going on, this is a great paper if you think about it. This is an amazing paper, but the way it was kind of executed is pretty terrible in my opinion. It's just bad. I think the best way this could have been avoided entirely was if the student contacted one or two maintainers in the Linux kernel and say, hey, we want to do this experiment, but I want you to be to supervise this act, right? So if there's like one or two are aware of this and they're gonna be put on top of the commits, right, review, they will eventually code it and will never make it to the repo. But this never happened. It's just, there was a whole surprise to the Linux kernel, and that's why Linux kernel maintainers were really, really mad about this. And you can quickly, I'm not gonna reference anything. You can quickly find the mailing list repo. You can read through all that stuff. I'm gonna read some of the things to you. There's some of the replies that the Linux maintainer made to this one individual that I'm not gonna make, right? Again, don't try to harass anyone, guys. I don't condone. I actually said this right this time. I do not condone any harassment of any kind to any person. Like, as always, assume the best in people. Don't assume the worst in general, right? Like, otherwise, why would someone use their real name and their real address and their real Twitter to essentially do such bad thing? They submitted some of the comments under, I think, some accounts, a Gmail account, and then they submitted fix for these commits, other fixes for these patches under their real names. So and they claimed, hey, by the way, don't push these things, but I think eventually everything got fixed. But it was eventually got caught, right? But here's what got really, really bad here. Let's read through some of these things. From Greg, again, another Linux maintainer. If you look at the code, this is impossible to have happen. Please stop submitting known invalid patches. Your professor is playing around with the review process in order to achieve a paper in some strange and bizarre way. This is not okay. It is wasting our time, which kind of agree. And we will have to report this again to your university, because it looks like this went back and forth, and eventually they wanted to ban the University of Minnesota from making any comments to the Linux kernel, which is something I think is a little bit blown over proportion. Like, let's think through this a little bit. University of Minnesota have been contributing made a great contribution to science and computer science. So banning it because just because of this one act is kind of too much, in my opinion. And we still didn't hear from the student themselves what were their intention here, right? And then they reference the actual paper, going through all this stuff. And so this is one of the comments of one of the Linux maintainer. But let's read this. I think what we need to somehow establish is some norms about how academic researchers engage with open source communities in general, and the Linux kernel communities in particular. To be fair, I don't know if this person was deliberately trying to get nonsense patches in just to demonstrate that there is less review for trivial patches, as this is the purpose of the paper, right? Again, so this is not his or her paper, right? This is just someone who trying to kind of, I think they're writing another paper and then just reference this manual, and they wanted to execute it maybe somehow. So yeah, situation is really dicey. Let's read through the statement that the University of Minnesota actually made. Computer science and engineering. And I think we can show this safely. Statement from Computer Science and Engineering on Linux kernel research. Leadership in the University of Minnesota Department of Computer Science and Engineering learned today about the details of research being conducted by one of its faculty members and graduate students into the security of the Linux kernel. The research method used raised serious concerns in the Linux kernel community, and as of today, April 21, this has resulted in the university being banned from the contributing to the Linux kernel. This is unfortunate, right? If you think about it, it's like one student, one faculty member, right, causing all this chaos. Like the whole university now have all these good patches, all this good contribution, gone. We take this situation extremely seriously. We have immediately suspended this line of research. We will investigate the research method and the process by which this research method was approved, determine appropriate remedy action, and safeguard against future issues. If needed, we will report our finding back to the community as soon as practical. Again, if you think about it, the final result of what this happened, if this got in, which the student and the faculty member, they tried their best not to let the Linux maintainer actually merge the code, but it actually happened. It did merge. Now they found it, but they wasted, think about it, the time wasted on the Linux kernel community is a lot, right? They could have been fixing actual bugs right now instead of spending all this time just looking through patches that are they really good or not? So if you think about it, that's a complete waste of time, and I have to agree. This is very, very bad, right? The actual results from a good intention, from the paper itself, this paper is actually good, and I think we need to put a stop to these malicious comments from getting into open source code, because it's really easy, and it happened apparently with Linux. It happened with PHP. It's really easy to happen. So the goal of the paper is noble, but the way it was implemented is absolutely bad, I think, right? They could have done better ways. They could have communicated behind the scenes with one or two Linux maintainers. Hey, guys, we want to do this experiment. Okay? Let's group some of the people, some of the Linux maintainers, just a few of them. And then, hey, we're going to do this on April, whatever, 22, April 21. You guys ready? We're going to submit few patches that are bad and see if they made it into the, if they pass the review process, you guys should be there to stop the patches, essentially, from getting into the software. If they have done that, none of this stuff would have happened, and the paper would have been gained much, much more attraction, and we have so much more awareness would be risen as a result. So it's really unfortunate that this happened, in my opinion. I don't know what to think, to be honest. Again, I don't condone anything kind of bullying or harassing the students or the faculty or the Linux kernel maintainer. I don't condone any of that. I think this is just it's wasteful effort, right? Because we don't know if they really did that on purpose. Yeah, it is bad. They kind of have to take responsibility for what happened, the time wasted, and all the work that have to happen to unmerge and roll back all these changes from the Linux kernel. Because if they essentially made it to the actual production, to the build, which I don't believe it will, because those students will eventually have said, hey guys, this is all a prank, don't do it. They will not, it will never, I think that it will never make it to actual software, right? But to think that this is actually, they did this on purpose, the students, I don't think they did that on purpose or in bad faith. Hey, I want to break the Linux kernel. No, they did it for their education. I think they just executed it badly, let's say. Again, guys, what do you think about the whole situation? Are you on the Linux community kernel side, or are you on the student side, or are you divided? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm going to see you on the next one. You guys stay awesome. And just, yeah, be careful out there of these nasty comments in general. Just that, I think regardless, I think we gain awareness. We gain some awareness from this incident. I believe so. Like, regardless, yeah, time was wasted, unfortunate, but if that's what prepared much better, we would have gained much better awareness. But again, all right, guys, I'm gonna see you in the next one, you guys.